I bought an original Mauser Kar98k from 1937. I promise I can be trusted with firearms. The Kar98k was the standard issue infantry rifle to the German Wehrmacht in World War II. Millions of these were produced throughout the war, and even despite later technological advancements, such as the semi-auto Gewehr 43 and the world's first assault rifle, the STG-44, this bolt-action rifle remained the workhorse of the Wehrmacht until its defeat in 1945. So here I am to tell you its history. The Kar98k is a bolt-action rifle that uses the 7.92 by 57mm Mauser cartridge, also known as 8mm Mauser. The Kar98k has a magazine capacity of 5 rounds, which were loaded via stripper clips. Most riflemen carried 2 leather pouches carrying 30 rounds each. To understand how the Kar98k came to be, we need to briefly look back into the trenches of World War I. Germany's standard issue rifle in World War I was the Gewehr 98. It was accurate, reliable, and powerful, but there was one major problem. It was cumbersome. At over 1.2 meters long, it was awkward to use in the cramped trenches and close quarters fighting that came to define World War I. But the Germans also issued a carbine version in World War I. Originally designated Kar98AZ, it simply became Kar98 during World War I and was finally redesignated Kar98A in 1923. That brings me to a major pet peeve of mine. Please do not call the Kar98k a Kar98. Just don't do it, because you're referring to this, which is not the Kar98k. Anyways, Kar98As were given to specialized troops and were easier to maneuver than the Gewehr 98, but they came with their own issues, including egregious muzzle flash and loudness. After its defeat in 1918, Germany was very harshly butt-boinked by the Treaty of Versailles. The new German army, the Reichswehr, was formed in 1921 and was limited to just 100,000 men. It was only allowed 84,000 rifles and 18,000 carbines, and it mostly relied on leftover World War I weapons like the Gewehr 98 and Kar98A. Lots of G98s were updated into what collectors call the G98M, but the system was still clearly becoming outdated. Germany needed a new rifle, but not just the Kar98k yet, because that wasn't allowed, that's illegal. Allied Control Commission. So, in 1924, they developed the Kar98B, which was inspired by the rare World War I bicyclists version of the Gewehr 98, the Radfahrer Gewehr. In fact, the Kar98B was nearly identical to the Radfahrer Gewehr, the only addition being the new rear tangent sight. Despite the designation, it wasn't actually a carbine. It was the exact same length as the Gewehr 98. It was only designated as such to keep the Allied Control Commission happy. Meanwhile, better and more modernized versions of the German 98 family were appearing abroad, like the FN Model 24 and the Czech VZ24. Inspired by this, but still restricted by the Allies, Mauser responded in 1924 with the Standardmodell. These Standardmodells were on paper not particularly used for any naughty purpose, and were mainly exported to foreign militaries, but they still eventually sneakily found their ways into the arms of the SS and the SA. Things are getting a little fishy here, aren't they? Then, in 1933, Hitler came to power, and Germany's secret rearmament plans went into full overdrive. Suddenly, all these totally not military rifles start being produced in a new model, which is extremely similar to the Kar98k. These were issued to the German Postal Service, the Reichspost, because postmen very famously need to be armed to the teeth with brand new Mauser rifles, right? Yes, they do. Totally not suspicious. It's said by some historians that a considerable amount of the Model 1933 Standardmodells, marked DRP for Deutsche Reichspost, were actually sent out to the SS and the SA again, and not the Postal Service. Now, here's the part you have all been waiting for. 1 year later, in mid-1934, the very first Kar98k started being produced by Mauser and J.P. Sauer. Sometime after, in March of 1935, the new Wehrmacht was officially established. This was, of course, blatantly against the Versailles Treaty limitations. But by this point, neither Hitler nor the Allies really cared about the Treaty of Versailles. And soon enough, the Kar98k was adopted as a standard issue rifle in June of 1935. But before we continue with that, I want to very quickly thank today's sponsor, World of Warships, for sponsoring today's video. If you've ever dreamed of taking command of some of the most legendary warships in history, then this is the perfect time to jump in. World of Warships lets you control a massive fleet of ships from history's greatest naval forces, from destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers to submarines. With over 850 ships available across 13 different nations, there's an incredible amount of variety. And for all of my fellow German history nerds out there, The game features more than 100 German ships, including legendary vessels like the battleship Bismarck, the cruiser Prinz Eugen, and the aircraft carrier Kraft Zeppelin. Some ships are even designed using real historical documents and actual blueprints, making World of Warships feel like a true virtual museum of naval history. World of Warships offers a detailed and immersive naval experience. With massive maps and intense battles, every match challenges you to learn, adapt, and improve, and that's what makes every victory feel rewarding. World of Warships combines realistic naval combat with exciting tactical gameplay. With massive maps, stunning visuals, and deep customization options, every battle brings a new challenge. Constant updates, new ships, game modes, and special events keep the experience fresh and rewarding. Play for free with your friends or family on PC, and if you prefer console or mobile, World of Warships is available there too. So, if you want to support my channel, use my link in the description to join the game. Let's have a look at the external parts of the Kar98k. I can't show anything else because it is deactivated. Anywho, that right there is the butt plate. This is a milled flat butt plate, which is characteristic of early war and pre-war rifles. This is the stock. This is a walnut stock. This assembly disc. We have the strap carrying mechanism. We have the trigger and trigger guard and magazine floor plate. Take a look at the screw over there that exists for the sole purpose of holding a screw in place. Peak German over-engineering, gotta love it. Let's look a little bit at the top of the rifle here. So this is the safety. I can't do anything with it because, again, it's neutered. And then we have the bolt, the receiver, and on the receiver ring here, it has the manufacturer's code, which is S42 for Mauser. And we have the tangent rear sight over here. And when you flip up the rear sight leaf, you see something very cool and awesome. It has range markings on both the front and the back side of the rear sight leaf. So this wasn't there for no reason. It was there so that soldiers, when lying prone, they could adjust the range without lifting their heads and exposing themselves to enemy fire. And of course, it also goes up to 2,000 meters, which is completely unnecessary. So up here in the front of the rifle, we have the rear and front barrel bands and the barrel band spring. Interesting to note that this is an early style H-ring barrel band. Over here, we have the barrel and the front sight. Another interesting thing to note is that this one doesn't have a front side hood. That's because they weren't introduced until later. And then we have the bayonet mount and the cleaning rod. It's so hard to do anything with nails that are slightly longer. Anyway, this is the cleaning rod. And just for the gits and shiggles, I'm also going to show you guys my Kar98k bayonet from 1939. Anyway, it doesn't have matching parts, but that's fine because my rifle also doesn't have matching parts. We don't match in this household. Now we're going to put it on the bayonet mount. Anyway, here it is mounted. This is perfect for stabbing people. That brings us to today's big question. How did the Kar98k actually perform in combat? The Kar98k was perfectly suitable and effective for the Germans in the beginning of the war, helped by the fact that the fighting in early campaigns hadn't become as brutal and desperate as it would later become. But after Operation Barbarossa in 1941, when everything started to turn sour on the Eastern Front, the Kar98k started to slowly become less suited for the new grisly style of fighting the Wehrmacht was engaged in. On the bright side, the Germans were exposed to new Soviet firearms they hadn't seen before, like the SVT-40, which would later influence some of their own designs. That also brings me to another point. The Germans did field sniper versions of the Kar98k, with an impressive variation of scopes. But sniper rifles were actually quite limited early in the war. It wasn't until the failure of Barbarossa that the Germans realized just how much damage a scoped marksman could do, especially after seeing the Soviets field them in large numbers. Even then, there still weren't a whole lot of German sniper rifles even by the end of the war, so many Germans also resorted to using captured Soviet sniper Mosin Nagants. Anyway, getting back to the point, the limitations of the Kar98k became especially apparent later in the war, when American troops started fighting the Germans with their standard-issue semi-automatic M1 Garands. So, why did the Germans stick with it for the entire war then? The short answer is logistics. Germany simply didn't have the resources to replace the Kar98k if they wanted to. Please keep in mind, every major power except for the United States still had a bolt-action rifle as their standard-issue infantry rifle, so it wasn't really the case of Germany being technologically behind. However, Allied arsenals had advantages the Wehrmacht lacked, such as the Soviet Union's enormous ability to mass-produce weapons, and the British Lee Enfield's 10-round magazine capacity compared with the Kar98k's 5-round capacity. Now, the Germans did have more advanced firearms in their arsenal, like the Gewehr 43, a semi-automatic rifle inspired by the Soviet SVT-40, and the STG-44, the world's first modern assault rifle. Both of these theoretically could have been potential replacements for the Kar98k's role, but by that point, Switching over would have meant retooling factories, producing millions of new rifles with dwindling resources, and retraining millions of troops in the middle of a losing war. In fact, by 1944, the Germans had already started reissuing Kar98As to frontline combatants. Speaking of reissue World War I rifles, here's an example of a Kriegsmodell Gewehr 98 that a follower sent in. A considerable amount of Gewehr 98s were converted for Wehrmacht use in World War II, but this beautifully ugly last-ditch conversion really makes you want to forget about the whole new standard issue rifle idea. Now, I said Kriegsmodell, but I haven't exactly went into what that means yet. So, that brings us to our next question. How exactly did the design of the Kar98k evolve throughout the war? Around 1939 or 1940, laminated stocks made of glued layers of beech wood became mostly standardized. They were stronger, cheaper, and much quicker to produce than walnut stocks. Also in 1940, the Germans standardized a front sight hood to protect the front sight blade from damage, and in 1941, they introduced a cupped metal butt plate to reinforce the laminated stocks, as they were prone to cracking when used with a flat butt plate. After that, though, the focus shifted almost entirely to cutting costs. The markings underneath the rear sight leaf disappeared. The distinctive H-ring barrel band was replaced with a simpler, smooth version, and metal parts were gradually growing of lesser quality. Then, in late 1944, came the Kriegsmodell, the war model. In a full Kriegsmodell, there was a lack of bayonet mount, cleaning rod, spring-loaded barrel bands, disassembly disc, and of course, say goodbye to these little locking screws. The metal parts were sloppily stamped and finished, and they didn't even bother adding any finish to the stock. You know, things are getting pretty bad when the Germans start willingly under-engineering their products. Now, I don't know about you, but if I got a rifle that looked like this handed to me, I would probably assume that the Soviets were about 20 seconds away from capturing me. Anyways, the Kar98k remained the workhorse of the Wehrmacht until Germany's defeat in 1945. On top of that, it was a very accurate, reliable, and sturdy bolt-action rifle. All three branches of the Wehrmacht, the Heer, Luftwaffe, and Kriegsmarine, used the Kar98k as their standard issue rifle. The main differences in Kar98ks issued to the Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine was that these rifles were sometimes marked with corresponding letters L on the stock for Luftwaffe or M, N, or O for Kriegsmarine stocks. This was opposed to the Heer Kar98ks, which had an H on the stock. Now, just how many Kar98ks were produced by the end of World War II? Now, the general consensus seems to be about 14 million. Up to 200,000 Kar98ks were made by forced labor in concentration camps. Facilities associated with camps contributed to manufacturing and assembly under cruel conditions overseen by the SS. So, what happened to the millions of Kar98ks after Germany fell in 1945? Stocks of surplus Kar98ks were either captured or purchased by numerous countries, such as Yugoslavia, Norway, France, Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, and even Israel. Many were reissued to early Warsaw Pact militaries, such as East Germany. Portugal was also a big fan of the Kar98k and bought theirs from Germany during the war directly under contract. And now, I'm going to tell you guys a very naughty secret. My beautiful Kar98k is a Portuguese export. I lied to you all. Ow. Except I didn't really, actually. Listen. So my Kar98k is from the first batch of rifles that Mauser sent out to Portugal. This is the M937. These M937s were taken straight off of Mauser's production line, stamped with Portuguese markings on the left side of the stock, and shipped out as is. As these were originally meant for Wehrmacht use, they are otherwise perfectly intact 1937 Kar98ks with German markings, and even have an S42 for Mauser on the receiver. The M937A, the second half of the 1937 contract, had a different front sight hood and sling. This is also when they started to put the Portuguese cartouche on the receivers. Then the third 1941 contract, M937Bs, on the other hand, were sent out pretty much as is. What do you guys think? Was the Kar98k the best choice of small arm for the Wehrmacht in World War II? Let me know in the comments down below. Check out my Patreon for exclusive photos and videos. All funds go directly to more props and uniforms for the channel. Thank you guys very much. Don't forget, the link for World of Warships is waiting for you in the description. Support the channel today by using my code, and I'll see you guys on the seas.